Yet, by the early hours of June 24th, it was clear that the voters had ignored the warnings of economists, allies, and their own government, and after more than 4 decades in the EU, were about to step boldly into the unknown. So let me ask a question now. Let's see. Kengo-san, you are Japanese, correct? Okay. Try to imagine that you were not Japanese, but you had a British passport. Okay? So if your government and your best friends, America, right, and Nobel economists told you that you should stay in the EU, would you follow their advice?
Yes.
You would? Who would follow the advice of experts? Hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 12, 13. Okay, so slightly over half the room. Okay. What the British people did was that they rejected the advice of experts. Right? Now, this is an important part of understanding the British mentality. We don't like to be told what to do. Right? I think this may be true in Japan for some people, but for the majority of people, I think that they basically follow what the government says. If Abe-san says you have to be more global, all the companies, they start acting more global, right? So there is a kind of, in British culture, there's a thing called the British bulldog spirit. Do you know this phrase? British bulldog? You know bulldog sauce? You know the dog on it? That's a bulldog. And they say that the British people have a bulldog spirit because they like a fight. You know, they don't like to just listen. Okay, so Kengo-san, you said you would follow the advice of experts.
Yeah.
But I think that the ordinary British person would think, why is this person telling me to do something? You know, what's in it for me? What's in it for that expert, right? So that's an important feature of British people. You could see this during World War II as well, when the British were being bombed by the Germans. They decided that they don't want to give up. They'll keep fighting, right? Because we don't like being told what to do. There's a very strong independence. I think in Japanese you call it hanko seishin. So we have that in abundance, perhaps too much maybe. But that's an important part of British character. Okay, let's move on. Line 13. The tumbling of the pound to 30-year lows offered a taste of what is to come. Okay, Shinji-san, why do you think that the pound fell?
Because people think that the economy of Britain is worse.
Okay. So if an economy is bad, the currency falls?
Well, that's necessarily the case.
In Japan, is the economy good? The yen's going up.
That's because of that's compared to other currencies.
Okay.
So
Do you think the economy is going to go back?
in Britain, you mean? Yeah, as a result of the Brexit, they would suffer economically.
Okay.
In the long run, that's what they're saying.
Okay. Well, that's what some people are saying.
Yeah.
The economists are saying that. Are there any economists in this room? Anyone in finance? Ino-san? You're not. Okay. I think the key word here is risk, right? Japan, whenever there is global risk, people buy yen, right? Because they see it as a safe haven. That's why the yen is now very expensive. What is it, 101 yen for each dollar? Only a few months ago it was 120 yen. But this is because they say that Japan is a very stable economy, right? They know what's going to happen. There is not going to be a revolution. Japanese people are still going to pay their debts, right? So Japan is seen as a very safe, stable economy. But now, in Britain, there's a lot of risk, right? Why is there risk, Moimi-san? Yes. No? Anybody? Koji-san? Why is there risk? Sorry?
They exit from EU and they have to fight.
They have to fight.
The UK have to stand up. Has to fight to the world.
Has to fight the world.
Yes. Because
I wasn't aware of that.
and they have to be owned capital. They have to make every whole economy.
Okay. There's a lot of work to do.
Yes. I want.
Okay. I think risk. What is the meaning of risk? Ruby-san.
There's a possibility.
It's a possibility. Right. I think the key word is uncertainty. Right? Japan, we know what's going to happen. Right? The global economy, what do you call it? Economists can sort of predict what will happen, right? That the pension fund is going to keep buying Nikkei stocks, right? That Kuroda-san is still going to buy lots of JGBs, right? What's that? But now that Britain has exited the EU, we don't know what kind of country it's going to become. Is it going to be isolated away from Europe? Is it going to go closer to America? Is it going to go closer to China? Who knows, right? That's risk. That's uncertainty, right? And that is why people are saying that the pound has fallen. Because, of course, maybe the economy, Shinji-san, you said maybe the economic outlook is bad. If you ask the people who voted Lee, they will say, no, actually, we now have more bargaining power, right? So some people, I think it's arguable, right? Things have changed. Maybe it'll be good for the future. Maybe it'll be bad. We don't know. But the thing is that we do not know, right? That is what traders and economists don't like. They only want to invest in things that are low risk, right? Now, the British economy is very high risk because they don't know what's going to happen. Right? It may be good, it may be bad, but you don't know. So that is why the pound has fallen to such lows. That's one theory. Okay? Line 13. As confidence plunges, Britain may well dip into recession. A permanently less vibrant economy means fewer jobs, lower tax receipts, and eventually extra austerity. The result will also shake a fragile world economy. Scots, most of whom voted to remain, may now be keener to break free from the United Kingdom, as they nearly did in 2014. Eddie-san, what happened in 2014? You don't remember? What happened in 2014, people? Hitomi-san? No, that was last year. That's 2015. 2014, Scotland, what happened?
All right.
Yes, the Scottish people, right? Scottish people held a referendum, and they decided, the people voted, they said we want to stay in the United Kingdom with England and Wales and Northern Ireland, okay? So, the question then is, do you think it's fair for the Scottish people to have another referendum because now Britain is exiting the EU? Aki-san?
I think it's fair enough because they decided, because at the time the EU was still in EU, so they made up their mind.
Okay. So that's one argument. Other people say that, listen, the Scottish people already had their chance. They wanted to stay in Britain. Right? They could have left the Union and they would have still been in the EU. Right? So it's, a lot of people in England are making fun of Scottish people, saying that they're a little bit kind of koshinake because they said they wanted to leave, but then they didn't leave. Now they're saying they want to leave again to make their mind up. They say it's a never-ender, right? So, that's Scotland. Okay, line 17. Across the channel, Eurosceptics such as the French National Front will see Britain's flounce out as encouragement. The EU, an institution that has helped keep the peace in Europe for half a century, has suffered a grievous blow. Okay, Osama-san, do you agree that the EU has helped keep peace on the continent? You agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody not agree? Everybody agrees? Really? Aya-san? Do you agree?
I don't have much knowledge, so I don't know.
Okay. All right. How about you, Shiori-san? Do you agree? Why? Cannot explain? Okay. How about you, Nami-san? Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, why?
The question is the EU how to support the peaceful.
Yeah, to maintain peace.
Basically, yes. And in terms of like economy and also job opportunities for people living in Japan. Like without EU policy, I don't think it was so peaceful.
Okay. Interesting. But I think the one thing that's difficult to prove is the cause and effect. Cause and effect is in Japanese inkakanke, right? Is it because of the existence of the EU that there has been peace in Europe for, what, 60 years, 70 years? Is that why? Can we prove that? No? No. So, I think that that's one criticism of this statement. Maybe, also there has been conflicts in Europe, actually. There has been Yugoslavia, right, that's one conflict zone. If you remember in the 1990s, Slobodan Milosevic, right, in Kosovo. And what has happened in the Ukraine in 2014, right? So that's all in Europe. And of course there's fighting going on there. So did the EU stop that? Of course not. So we have to question these statements. This article is from The Economist, right, which is supposedly a great newspaper, but they also have a policy that they want to stay in Europe, of course. That's why they wrote this piece. So we have to question what they're writing. Is it really true that EU has kept the peace in Europe? Another thing we can say is that maybe Europe was tired of war, right? There was 2 world wars, right? 1914 to 1918, World War I, right? And then in World War II was 1939 to 1945, very long war, okay? Many people died, it was terrible. Maybe Europe was just simply very tired of fighting each other, okay? And also, there's now nuclear weapons, which means that the risk of going into war with each other is much greater than before, right? Before it was chemical weapons, trench warfare, right, hand-to-hand combat, but now the risks are much greater. Sorry, is it cold in here? Oh, okay. So we have to question these statements that the newspaper makes, I think. Is it really true? We have to ask that question. I think that we don't know if the EU has kept the peace on the continent. Okay, so we have to question everything. Line 22. Managing the aftermath, which saw the country split by age, class, and geography, will need political dexterity in the short run. In the long run, it may require a redrawing of traditional political battle lines and even sub-national boundaries. Okay, I want to ask you guys, what was the reason that they're saying on NHK that Britain exited Europe? I don't know because I haven't been watching NHK or Japanese TV. So please, somebody enlighten me. Anybody watched the news recently? Come on, okay. It's alright. I don't have TV. I don't watch it. Kaori-san?
It's not from NHK, but I had some Britain people's regret about the result to leave the EU.
Regret is what they say. But why is it that British people voted to leave? Who voted to leave? Yuka-san? No? On the news? Who's been watching TV?
Older.
Huh?
Older people.
Older people.
Older people.
That's what they're saying.
I'm not.
Yeah. Older people in Britain wanted to leave the EU. Why? Yeah. Why? Why? What's the reason?
Because of the system of this system.
It affects the old people?
Maybe.
Okay. How about you, Satoru-san? What's the analysis?
The older people, I had the agriculture of the United Kingdom and it is restricted by the EU, so they don't all make that United country big. They will have to share the agriculture and also fish market. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they have to share the seas with Norway.
Yeah.
But okay, Britain has only what 5% of what do you call it? Britain has 30% of European waters to fish for. That's their allocation. They have a huge allocation from Europe, so it's not fishing, right? So this thing about old people, I question whether this is true or not, because on my Facebook, I have friends from London, right? They keep posting articles about old people in England and how they don't care about young people and that they won't be alive when Britain will feel the effects of leaving the EU. So, is it really about the old people? I wondered. So I looked at the research, and some of the research that has been done has not really been statistically reliable. So what they did was they asked 1,200 people, right? That was the sample frame. That's the Hyohon, right? About the old people and how they voted. Is that enough people to say about the whole of England? I don't think so. So I think that this may be a kind of distraction from what the real issue is. And I think the real issue here is class and geography. Now class is Taihyu. Now you may have heard before that England is a class society. What are the classes? Wataru-san?
Classes?
Yeah, in England.
It's like working class.
Yes, working class.
Working class. Middle class.
Middle class.
Lower middle class. Upper middle class.
Okay.
And rich class.
Upper class.
Upper class.
Right. So the working class, what kind of people are they? Lever. Yeah, workers, yes. Working class are people who live in the council estates. Council estates is danji, right? They live in these areas. Their job opportunities are not, their job prospects are not very, very good. They're not the most hard-working people in Europe, right? And that's the majority of Britain, really. On the other hand, you have the middle classes. In Japan, you have a big middle class. I think that most of you are from the middle class in Japan. You have a stable house, fixed income coming to you every month. And I imagine that most of you are employed on full-time contracts. But that is Japanese society. Japan has I think is the only country in the world with a growing middle class. Middle classes are good because you have stability. But increasingly in Europe, you're having a squeezed middle class, right? higher taxes, right? Less pensions, you have to work longer. So the middle class is being squeezed. And the upper classes, they keep getting richer. This has been the kind of global trend outside of Japan. Even in Japan, I think. But not as bad as the rest of the world. And finally, it says here, geography, right? I want to show you something. This is from my blog. The blue is remain. Red is leave. What does it look like? This is London, by the way. Where is it? That's London. Okay. So, it looks like the country is very much divided, right? Up here is Scotland. We have Northern Ireland here, right? So this looks like to me that people, we have Manchester, the northwest. These are big cities, right? It looks like the people in the cities want to stay in Europe, but the rest of the country, the people in the countryside want to leave. That's what it looks like to me. Not about the old people, but it looks like something about geography and class. Now, if you go to the countryside in England, okay, because when I was living in England, I was in London, and then I went to university, which was outside of London. Okay, and when I went to this place is called Guildford, I joined a football team, right? And on the weekends, we would travel to different towns to play the local players. And sometimes I would meet the opposition, right? And they would be the type of people who would vote Leave, right? The kind of redneck, sort of hillbilly type of England. Right? These people, they don't have many job prospects. They live very kind of, they're almost forgotten by the rest of England, right? I think here in Japan, if you go to the Chiho, right, if you go to the Inaka, I don't know, maybe you will find something similar, maybe not. But in Japan, you have a culture of young people going to Tokyo, right? Is that right? Jokyo-suru? In England, there's not so much of a culture of young people going to London, right? Because London is so expensive. So, what I think I can see from this is that the country is very much divided into urban, upper class, and the rest of the country that is forgotten, right? Nobody cares about them. So, Britain is very much divided today. Now, let's move on. We'll come back to that topic later. Where was I? Line 24. There will be a long period of harmful uncertainty. Nobody knows when Britain will leave the EU or on what terms. But amid Brexiteers' jubilation and Remain's recriminations, two questions stand out. What does the vote mean for Britain and Europe? And what comes next? Okay. Let's see. Junko-san, what happens next?
Young people might go to another country to get a job.
Which country? How? They're no longer EU.
So already they can't go.
What do you think will happen for Britain?
For Britain?
Yeah.
I think some people have to go back to their country. So Britain might need some workforce.
There'll be a shortage of labor.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yuki-san, how about you? What happens next?
I'm not sure, but I think they have to decide a prime minister.
Nobody wants to do it. Yeah, no one wants to do it. Cameron doesn't want to do it, Johnson doesn't want to do it, Corbyn doesn't want to do it. Farage stepped down, he's not going to do it, nobody wants him to do it. Okay, have selected another Prime Minister. Okay, son, what happens next?
I'm not sure, but I have a question of how immigration people stay in UK or not. What their jobs are going to do, or young people's job. It's easy to get. British people, young people, easy to get a job after that or not? I'm interested in this fact.
Jobs. Well, it depends on what kind of jobs. Right. You know, a job in McDonald's, a job in the city. You know? I think the quality of jobs is, the thing is we really don't know. But what about the country in general? Iverson, how about you? What happens next?
Britain or Europe?
Okay, Britain.
Okay.
You're going there, yeah?
I heard from the news they say they will be more dangerous in Britain because young people just didn't think much and they just vote for just wanted to say no, but they now regret. I heard only from the news, but they say they blame old age pensioners so much. So
Yeah.
they might be more frustrated. They might get denial.
Okay. Maybe. Well, they did that before, 5 years ago. I was there. I was not involved, by the way. But I want to hear your predictions about what happens to Britain next. What's the prediction, Yosuke, for the country?
But it depends on the new treaty or convention between UK and EU.
Yes.
So it's very hard to predict.
Okay, well maybe you could make a best case scenario and a worst case scenario.
The worst case is that the German and French tries to prevent any more exit from EU and try to make the convention very hard for the UK, and UK will get isolated and financially depressed afterwards. The best case is they can enjoy both the freedom of treaty with freedom of trading with the EU, and also released from the problem with migrants.
Okay. Well, I pretty much agree with you there. I think that the best case scenario for Britain would be a smooth Brexit and a treaty which is one like Norway or Switzerland, where they don't have to be part of the EU club, but they can trade within it, people can move freely within it, but with certain restrictions, right? Small restrictions. That's the best case for Britain, I think. But worst case, this is difficult. I think that worst case scenario could be very, very bad. You know, you said that Germany and France, they want to keep countries within the EU club. So what they do, like how they treat Britain now, is going to be very interesting. Because we saw what happened in Greece last year, right? Do you remember? They had a referendum, accept German austerity. Right? The people, Greek people, voted, don't know, we don't want to accept, right? And the Prime Minister, Tsipras, I don't know what you say in Japanese, but he became the Prime Minister of Greece, and then he stabbed his people in the back. He lied to them. He said, okay, we'll accept German austerity, even though the people didn't want it, right? So that's what happened in Greece by the Germans, right? Now, Greece is a small country compared to Britain. If the Germans try to do something similar with the British, then we don't know what's going to happen then. You know, there's a history of fighting between Germany and Britain, isn't there? Right? 2 world wars, before that, many wars as well. So, if Germany tries to blackmail the UK into staying in the EU by restricting trade or taking a very tough stance, who knows, maybe Britain may use the old Kurobne tactic, gumbo diplomacy, I don't know. But we really are living in uncertain times, right? So that's the worst case scenario. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let's move on. Brexit, the small print. The vote to leave amounts to an outpouring of fury against the establishment. Okay, again, this line, fury against the establishment. This is the mood of the people. People are not happy. Why are they not happy? What's up,
Why?
Yeah, why are they not happy? They're not happy with their current situation, right? They're not happy. Genjo, right? They're not happy with the current situation. They're not happy with seeing people in London making so much money and the rest of the country is poor, right? They're not happy with that. So it's like the country voted no, we don't want to stay in Europe, we want to leave. It was like a big middle finger up at the people in Brussels and people in London, right? Next line, 31. Everyone from Barack Obama to the heads of NATO and the IMF urged Britons to embrace the EU. Do you think this was a good idea for Mr. Obama to give his opinion on what British people should do? Eri-san? Yes?
Some advice.
Yeah. You think that's a good idea?
But for British people, how do you say? People don't like.
Yeah. I think that you're right. Is it really a good idea for Mr. Obama, the President of the United States, which is not part of the United Kingdom, to kind of get involved in British politics? This is almost like a foreign intervention, right? British people, even though America are our best friends, we have not had a very good relationship with them in terms of society, because remember, in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Americans pulled us into war with Iraq and Afghanistan, wars that we didn't really want to fight, right? So the relationship between America and Britain, British people, is not so good. Obama is not that popular in Britain. Why is he telling us how we should vote? That's the question. So basically, I think most people, when they saw Barack Obama say, oh, you guys should stay in the EU. So, who are you? Who the hell are you? Right? Mr. Obama doesn't represent British values. Mr. Obama doesn't care about Britain. Why are you talking? Be quiet. So I think that's kind of the visceral reaction of most British people. Who the hell are you? How can I? Right? So let's move on. Line 32. Their entreaties were spurned by voters who rejected not just their arguments, but the value of experts in general. Large chunks of British electorates that have borne the brunt of public spending cuts and have failed to share in Britain's prosperity are now enthralled to an angry populism. Okay, populism, this is a key word here. The anger of the people against the establishment. What is the establishment, Ayaka-san?
If there is something, establishment,
Mm-hmm.
to make something, to build something.
No, that's a different meaning. The establishment.
I don't know.
Anybody? The establishment. The establishment is basically the powers that be. Okay? So the establishment in Japan is the government, right? Jiminto, right? That's the establishment. Okay, so they're the ones in power, they're always in power, the kind of elite, Kyoyotsha, the establishment, right? Nihon Kaigi, right? The people who are in power, this is the establishment. It is the people's anger against the people who control them, right? So that's the establishment and the angry populism that is basically trying to get one over on the establishment. Okay, line 37. Britain's offered many reasons for rejecting the EU, from the democratic deficit in Brussels to the weakness of the Eurozone economies. But the deal-breaking feature of EU membership for Britain seemed to be the free movement of people. As the number of new arrivals has grown, immigration has risen up the list of voters' concerns. Okay, a very general question here. Let's see. Moemi-san?
Yes.
Do you think immigration is good for a country?
Depends. If the population is shrinking, it might be good because they like workers.
Mm-hmm.
But for working class people,
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they take their job.
Yes.
So they lose their job. So they feel it's tough.
Okay. All right. How about in Japan? Koji-san. Yes.
It is easy, actually, it is good. But I don't think it is easy because we have to get visa or we need some complicated documents and the process, long procedure and document procedure to immigrate.
Mm-hmm.
But if to go to abroad is generally good.
Okay. All right, fair enough. What is the kind of Japanese electorate's attitude towards immigration? Nami-san.
In Japan,
Yes.
I think in general, people in Japan are not welcoming immigrant people because Japanese people think they are kind of threat for working classes. And also it can be the kind of related to the crimes. Also, it's just image.
They may disturb the walk. Right? I think that's how the argument goes. But it's clear that Japan needs people to come, especially young people to work. So I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago called the BCCJ, the British Chamber of Commerce in Japan, 在日英国商業会 or something. And there's lots of British business people there. And there was one speaker, the speaker was a hedge fund manager, and he talked about immigration in Japan, right? Like you say, the Japanese electorate generally do not have a favorable opinion of immigrants coming to this country, but because the country needs it, what Abe-san has done has basically taken it off the agenda. So nobody talks about Imin coming to Japan, but they are coming. There's lots of them coming. I think if you go in Tokyo, you can see more and more foreigners, right? It's not a coincidence, it's happening. It's just that they don't talk about it because then the voters will not be happy with Abe-san, right? So it is happening. Whether it's good or not, it really depends, as you say, Abe-san. Right? Okay, let's move on. Line 42. The Leave side promised supporters both a thriving economy and control over immigration. But Britons cannot have that outcome just by voting for it. If they want access to the EU's single market and to enjoy the wealth it brings, they will have to accept free movement of people. If Britain rejects free movement, it will have to pay the price of being excluded from the single market. The country must pick between curbing migration and maximizing wealth. Okay, let's see. Shiori-san, you see this on line 44, to enjoy the wealth it brings. You see that? Do you think the EU brings wealth to Britain or to British people? Does it?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Really? Why?
I think UK gave money or something to other countries, so I don't think.
Okay, but you have to kind of consider all the things, the subsidies we get for the farmers, right? The subsidies for the universities, the tariffs that we save on trading with EU, right, because there are no taxes, additional customs to pay. So if you think about that, I think that the writer here has a point about the wealth, but I think there's a question there as well. The wealth to, the wealth that the EU brings to Britain, does that mean that the people living outside of London are enjoying that wealth? Right? Because maybe in London they are enjoying the benefits of being in the EU, right? And maybe some of these blue areas, like Scotland or Northern Ireland, maybe they enjoy it. But maybe for the rest of the country, they don't see any of the wealth, right? So it doesn't matter to them whether they are in the EU or not. And it doesn't really matter to them that Britain is wealthier or not. As long as, I think you need, there's an important distinction about British people being wealthy and the country being wealthy, right? So if the elites are taking all the money and the working class people are not seeing any of the money, then the wealth it brings doesn't really reach the people who need it. So I think there's an important distinction that needs to be made here. Again, we talk about class, right, and also geography as well. Okay, especially for companies, right? Companies and their shareholders, right? It's good for them to be in the EU, right? Goldman Sachs was one of the biggest kind of campaign contributors to the Remain camp, right? They gave lots of money for this campaign. Why? So they don't have to move their offices from London, right? So for them, it was important to stay in the EU so they can still do their business in Europe. But now that has changed. They have, you know, the wealth that they were enjoying before is now, it now comes with a lot of risk, right? So yes, you have to think about who the wealth goes to. Line 48. David Cameron is not the man to make that choice. Having recklessly called the referendum and led a failed campaign, he has shown catastrophic misjudgment and cannot credibly negotiate Britain's departure. That should now fall to a new Prime Minister. We believe that he or she should opt for a new Norwegian-style deal that gives full access to the world's biggest single market, but maintains the principle of the free movement of people. The reason is that this would maximize prosperity. And the supposed cost, migration, is actually beneficial, as Leave campaigners themselves have said. European migrants are net contributors to public finances, so they more than pay their way for their use of health and education services. Without migrants from the EU, schools, hospitals and industries such as farming and the building trade would be short of labour. Okay, I want to kind of ask a kind of general question here. My temper is almost a boiling point. I'm going to try to stay calm. Okay. In Japan right now, there is a trend for global, right? Everybody wants to be globalized. So now this naturally entails open borders, right? Free movement of people, goods and services, investment, right? Now, are you all in favor of global? Yes? No? You don't know? Shinji-san?
It is a tough question to answer.
I know.
But in general, yes, I go for globalization, or you have no choice but to accept it. So if you have to accept it, then accept it in a better way, or in a, I don't know, in a way that benefits to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
all right. Well, the British people chose not to accept it, right? So there is a choice, I think. Now, I think global, we have to talk about global, the British style, okay? British politics has, for a long time now, been about globalizing, and what that means is basically sell everything to the foreigners, right? Sell the energy industry, sell it to the Chinese investor. You have prime London real estate, right? £10 million or above. Sell it to Russian oligarchs or Arab sheikhs, right? Anyone with the money can come and buy in London, right? The real estate property. Because all the people in the world with a lot of money that they want to spend and keep it in real estate so that the value goes up, they go and buy a property in London, central London. What does that do? Well, it raises the cost of living in London, right? I'm from London. I am no longer living in London because London is very expensive. And not just because it's very expensive, it is also because there is a lack of hope for working class people. I'm from working class Britain, right? Now, you have immigration coming in, okay? Anyone from Europe can come to London and work, and we have lots of Polish people, we have lots of Romanians, Spanish people, and that's fine. But if you look on one side, all the prices of goods are going up, but the cost of labor doesn't go up, cost of labor goes down. Why? Because we have all the European immigrants coming and competing for jobs, right? They're working in Starbucks, in McDonald's, right? So unless you have a good, secure job in finance, right, which is basically the main industry of London, it's very, very difficult for you to have a good life in London. So I decided that I think that this market is not good for me. I have an option, I can come to Japan, which I took, and I'm very happy I took it. But my friends who are British, they don't have that option, right? So this is, for me, I think it says a lot that I left, right? Because I didn't see much hope. It's just the rich getting richer, and then the immigrants coming and then they take the jobs. The jobs are not good quality, right? So this is the situation of globalization in London and in Britain. So I think when you talk about globalization, you have to kind of define what style of globalization are we going to have, and then you have to be careful what you wish for as well. So I think always have to ask, what do you mean by globalization? Right. Line 60. Preventing Brexit. The hard task will be telling Britons who voted to leave that the free having and eating of cake is not an option. The new Prime Minister will face accusations of selling out, for the simple reason that he or she will indeed have to break a promise, whether over migration or the economy. That is why voters must confirm any deal, preferably in a general election rather than another referendum. This may be easier to win than seems possible today while the deal is being done. The economy will suffer and immigration will follow its own, blah, blah, blah. Brexit is also a grave blow for the EU. The high priesthood in Brussels has lost touch with ordinary citizens, and not just in Britain. A recent survey for Pew Research found that in France, a founder member and long a strong supporter, only 38% of people still hold a favourable view of the EU, 6 points lower than in Britain. In none of the countries the survey looked at was there much support for transferring powers to Brussels. Satoru-san?
Yes.
Do you think there is a future for the EU?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Anyone here doesn't think there is a future for the EU? Everyone thinks that the EU will last forever? I see you shaking your head.
I think it does have a future.
It does have a future?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I disagree. I think that the EU is not going to last for a very long time. I think maybe 10 years maximum. Now, let me just explain why I think this is. The EU is basically an economic bloc, a group of countries that work together, have free trade and so forth. But it is only a group of countries. It is not a single country like America or China with a shared identity and a shared language and a shared culture. Now, this class is about Western culture, right? Now, I think that the EU, it has Britain, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, whatever. They all have very different cultures, okay? Now, in Europe, Germany is the big economy. German people are very hard-working, aren't they? They say that the Japanese are like Germans, or the Germans are like Japanese. They work very hard, they're very serious, and so forth. But are Spanish people like this? No, they have siestas every day, right? What is it, 1 p.m., 3 p.m.? Have to have a nap, right? But the Spanish people now have to compete directly with German people, right, in the EU. What does that happen? What happens then? What happens?
Maybe German try to. Maybe German try to.
Absorb?
Absorb.
Not yet. No. But what has happened is that German businesses have entered new markets, right? Easy for them because it's free movement of goods and people within the EU, no tariffs. So you can buy German products in British supermarkets, in Spanish supermarkets, and so forth, because they are much better at producing stuff, they're much better at working, right? Because they're working when the Spanish people are sleeping. You ask the Greek people, they're drinking coffee all day, right? So this is the problem. It's not that Greek people are bad. I love Greek people, right? They gave us the classic Greek mythology. They created Western civilization. They created democracy. Democracy comes from the Greek word demos, right? The people. So it's not that Greek people are bad. They're just not as hardworking as German people in general. Plus, they don't pay their taxes. Right? So this is the problem. You have an economic union of a bunch of countries that are not like each other. They don't speak the same language. They don't have the same culture. Their social structure is completely different. So how can you keep this going on? Look at what's happened in Spain. 30% unemployment, 50% unemployment for young people. Right? So what hope is there for them? Now, in Europe, there's a lot of groups that want to leave Europe and they want to, get back their sovereignty. Far-right groups, kind of uyokuha, they're gaining more popularity because there's a class kind of forming within Europe. Okay, people who don't receive any benefits, and companies are making money hand over fist, and there's not enough good jobs going around. So I think that this is one reason why I think that the EU has a very bleak future. And additionally, I think that if you look historically at Europe, Europe is a continent where everybody is fighting each other, right? Yeah? Napoleon, remember? Yeah? They're all fighting against each other, historically. So what's the last 70 years have seen peace. But is that going to be the case in the future? Well, historically, no. Right? Always they're fighting against each other. So I think it's very difficult to say that the EU will last forever. I think that this is an experiment, a social experiment. And one that ultimately I think may fail. So I think that there's a big risk there for Europe. Okay, line 74, I'm steadily running out of time. Each country feels resentment in its own way. In Italy and Greece, where the economies are weak, they fume over German-imposed austerity. Okay, again, austerity, this is what happened in Greece last year, right? With Tsipras. In France, the EU is accused of being ultra-liberal, even as Britons condemn it for tying them up in red tape. In Eastern Europe, traditional nationalists blame the EU for imposing cosmopolitan values like gay marriage. Okay, something about gay marriage here. Is this in the culture of British people? Do British people have gay marriages? In London, maybe so, yes, they have the gay parades. In Brighton,
Yeah.
in Brighton, which is the gay capital. But for the rest of the people, the traditional people with the normal, not normal, I don't want to say normal, but the kind of old, traditional values and culture, this is very alien to them, right? Even for me, right? I grew up in London. My friends and I, we used to kind of call each other gay because for making fun. right? Because the culture was, you make fun of other people, it's funny, you call them gay or whatever. But now you can't say that, right? So the culture has changed dramatically. And I lost several of my Facebook friends because we were having a debate on Brexit, and I said that yes, I hope that British people made the right decision. It is their decision to leave. You have to respect it. And I can see why they want to leave. Right? Because the London people with good jobs, in a good class, middle class, upper class, they are so distant from the rest of England, right? I only know about the rest of England because I played in a football team that travelled to small towns to play against these local lads, right? But for my friends who are kind of upper middle class, they don't do that. They don't play football, so they don't know what's happening in the rest of England. So this is the kind of divide and the distance between London people and the rest of the country. Okay. And I think this gay marriage thing that's the same thing applies in Eastern Europe, Poland, and so forth. This is not in their culture. They don't need it. They don't want it. Right. Line 79. Although the EU needs to deal with popular anger, the remedy lies in boosting growth, completing the single market in, say, digital services and capital markets would create jobs and prosperity. The Eurozone needs stronger underpinnings, starting with a proper banking union, acting on age-old talk of returning powers, including labour market regulation to national governments, which blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's kind of finish it here. I just want to ask you again, why do you think people in England voted to leave? No, sir, why? After today's lesson, why do you think?
Why? Because of their bulldog spirit. Bulldog spirit.
What?
Bulldog spirit.
Because the bulldog spirit, okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. And anyone else? Why did they leave? Why did England leave? This is a Madame session. Ino-san, why?
I think the biggest concerns are migration.
Immigration, okay. Anyone else?
Working class people wanted to make change or something.
Wonderful answer. Change. I think this is a really key answer. Remember, I said the current situation. They're not happy with the current situation. They want change, right? So, what else? Why do they want change? Because they're angry, right? Populism. Anger at the establishment. Any others? Ayako-san. Anger at what?
Anger at what?
Yeah. I think not just establishment, but anger at
EU?
EU, yeah, well, I think globalization. I think this is an anti-globalization vote. What else? Aki-san?
They want country back. They want their country
Okay. Sovereignty. It's an important concern. Way back there, Junko-san. Why? Why did English people want to leave? Why are they angry?
Because people think it's not going, their life is not going well, and they cannot become rich at all.
Yeah. Hopelessness, I think. That's what I felt. Hopeless in London. There's no hope.
Well, actually, I still think that people who think hopelessness voted to stay in EU because it's stable, and rich people who want to have their assets or money, etc., want to leave because they don't want to distribute their money.
Well, rich people want to leave.
Leave. So
Don't know.
actually, I have an opposite opinion. I think still.
Okay. Well, if you look at the kind of campaign contributions, overwhelmingly, the business interest, business people wanted to stay in the EU, the economists and so forth. And then some sections wanted to leave, of course. I think minority sections of the business elite. But most businessmen wanted to stay because then they have the predictability. Now there's a lot of risk. So I think that we can talk about that a bit later. But there's one more thing that I think there's anger at. That's liberalism. And this is a new word. But we see the same type of thing happening in America, right? Donald Trump is getting very popular, right? What does he say? He's always, saying that immigrants are bad, the Mexicans got to negotiate tough with the Japanese, and so forth, right? So, and this is not just in America or Britain; it's happening in Europe as well, and I think even in Japan this is happening. So, this is very much a kind of a global trend right now. There is a pushback against the establishment, the globalization, and liberalism, right? I could talk for another hour, but I don't have time. But I have to close the lesson now because I'm almost out of time. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming today and sitting through this very long lesson. And I hope you learned something about the British bulldog mentality and about the problems of the EU, and also you can compare with your own situation in Japan. So thank you very much. ありがとうございました。The lesson is based on donations, so if you enjoyed it, please leave something in the box. If not, that's fine. And the building is going to close in 6 minutes, so I have to ask you to leave very 速やかにお願いします。